Hi, welcome to my Seize the Trout group. Now that's a little bit of a strange term, Seize the Trout. So I want to tell you the story behind that. So many years ago, my family used to go up to a camp high up in the mountains. It was called Lyman Lake. And actually was a church youth camp. And my dad was helping to build a big A-frame lodge. So every summer we would go and spend a week there. We'd stay in the cabins and play in the lake and go canoeing, and it was great. And we loved it. So one year when we were there, the Forest Service would come in and stock the lake with trout because a lot of fishermen came there. So one year when we were there, the Forest Service came in while we were there, and it was really cool because this big green Forest Service truck came with a big tank on the back, and all of the trout were inside there, and then they would send them down this hose into the lake. And when this happened, my brother and sister and I, we went and sat on the dock so we could watch all this happen. Well, one thing that was a little bit odd that we didn't expect is that when the fish came out of the tank into the lake, either the change in temperature or the shock from the drive or something, they were kind of in shock and just immobilized there in the water. They would just sit there in the water. And so we got this great idea that we could catch a fish by hand. And, we had tried to do that before, but the fish were always too fast. But on this day, the fish were just sitting there. And so we were sitting on the dock, and so we were talking about this. Well, I had a little bit of a problem because that lake also had leeches. And one time swimming, my brother had got a leech stuck to his leg, and I was so grossed out. I thought that was just hideous. And so I had become afraid of going into the lake, even though I had been swimming there so many times. But now all of a sudden, because of these leeches, I was afraid. And the water was pretty deep, and I was not a good swimmer. But the water was pretty shallow where the fish were just kind of sitting there in shock. And so I sat there on the dock, and I was thinking, oh, if I went in, I could catch a fish by hand. Oh, but the leeches and I was back and forth trying to decide what to do. But pretty much I just sat there. So my brother, he was a lot braver than I was. He really quietly slid off the dock and walked in the water and got over to where the fish were just kind of sitting there. And so he reached down really slowly, and all of a sudden he grabbed a fish and flipped it out of the water and onto the bank. And of course, now the fish is reacting and it's flipping around, and my brother's yelling, I got it, I got it. And he jumped out onto the bank and grabbed the fish, and it kept flipping out of his hands, and he'd pick it back up. And so he grabbed the fish and ran up the dirt path to where the cabin was with this fish, this trout, over his head. And I will never forget him in this red shirt and jeans shorts and a fish over his head, running up the path and yelling, I got it, I got it. And every now and then he'd drop it and it'd go in the dirt, and he'd pick it back up. And I watched him run all the way up, and I sat there on the dock wanting to catch a fish by hand, but afraid of the leeches. So that night for dinner, we all got to have a few bites of trout, and my brother was the big hero. And I just kept thinking about me sitting there on that dock, and I lost the opportunity. So now when we play the two truths and a lie, things I've done that are amazing, my brother gets to say, I've caught a fish by hand. And all I think about is I couldn't do it because of the leeches. And so seize the trout is a phrase that I've kind of used in my mind to remind me that there are times you have to ignore the leeches, ignore the deep water, get past your fear and just dive in and do the thing that you need or want to do. And so that's what Seize the Trout is all about. And so I hope that you'll be part of our Seize the Trout group, that you'll share times in your life when you seized the trout, or and can share with others, or times when you didn't, and the lessons you learned from that. So welcome to Seize the Trout.